I'm going to take your seat. You're going to start giving those tips every time. I think that's not a bad idea.
I think I might.
Or what we could do.
Take a minute, look down.
No, this is on my desk.
Yeah.
You may or may not. Okay.
Yes, we did talk about that, just to make sure we understand it's in the records. The way ours operates,
We won't get it.
Yeah, you sent Kevin, and I lost that Kevin, I lost that Kevin. He said, I'm sorry.
So you made it out there last night? Just the best that they were flat, so they weren't.
Water runs off.
It's a 1 week. Yeah. Yeah, they were good at
so even better for
They're much better than Schaaf. I've never seen that. It's sitting on my desk today. And then he comes out and he's like a pattern or something sitting on my desk. I'm like, what are you doing? Don't you know
Home raising.
it breaks a lot. Yeah.
And done.
We'll call this meeting of the Committee on General Laws and Pensions to order, and we're going to open up with a hearing on Senate Bill 680. Senator Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed Emery, Senate District 31, here to present Senate Bill 680 for consideration. I also have left a stack of some handouts up there that are a summary of a Moser's actuarial study regarding the proposal that I'm making today. Senate Bill 680 changes the legislators and other statewide elected officials from a defined benefit to a defined contribution retirement system. It applies to members of the General Assembly that first serve on or after January 1, 2017, and have not previously been employed in a position covered by Moser's or MPDRS, and it also covers statewide officials with that same stipulation if they're after 1/1/17 and they have not previously been employed in a position covered by either system. It would enable the employer and the employee to each contribute 4% of the employee's salary. Contributions will be immediately vested, so there would be no period where they would not recover their investment and the state's contribution to their retirement. If they subsequently were employed by a position covered by either Moser's or INPERS, then they would participate in that plan, but they would not get any credit for the time that they were in the defined contribution plan. With the implementation of term limits some years ago, this seems like a reasonable approach for elected officials, as opposed to defined benefit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I don't know, we may have some witnesses here.
Well, I know that you've thought about the issue of incentives for good qualified candidates to file for office, and that there is an incentive in that you do get a fairly okay retirement, and you get some. although it isn't stellar, because most you can serve is 16 years.
Right.
Right, in the House.
Unless you moved on into the executive branch or something.
Right, and so what do you think there is a trade-off here? This would be a defined contribution as opposed to a defined benefit.
That's right.
So it would save the state money more than likely,
Yes.
but it probably won't have as good of a benefit as the pension.
Right. There's not a lifelong benefit after you're vested, as there would be now. And part of that is recognizing that we're limited in our service. And I don't know that public service really, I guess, immediately demands that you have a retirement that goes along with it, but this does preserve some retirement. And I'm sure that, there are some states that don't even pay their legislators. Other than the per diem or whatever their expenses are. Missouri does pay us as legislators. But in terms of the contributions that we make to the state, those are limited in how long we can serve our constituents. And this would just mean that the exposure of our constituents to subsidizing our retirement would also be limited.
I know I never even thought about getting a retirement when I first ran for office.
Right.
You probably
did I.
didn't either. None of the other state employees have a 401k, but they all have retirement plans.
Everything else is defined benefits.
So you basically just be taking members of the General Assembly and statewide employee or statewide office holders.
Yes.
That would be it.
Yes, no change at all to those who are currently, and in fact, although I would be happy to be a part of this switch, those of us that are already under Mosers would not be affected by this. It would be employees that came in to the legislature or to these statewide offices who were not somehow previously under Mosers. If they were under Mosers, then they stay under Mosers. And if they were not were never under Mosers, then after January of 17, they would come in the defined contribution plan.
What if you were elected to office and were never an employee of the state prior and served your time and then became an employee of the state? Say you were appointed to be,
Right.
Then
you would come in under Mosers, but you would get no credit for it. Let's say you spent 16 years in the legislature, you wouldn't get credit for that towards your retirement because you would already have a retirement from those 16 years.
I think I've already told you that I have mixed feelings about this.
Sure.
I'm curious as to what the other members feel about it. Does anyone have any questions of the sponsor? Senator Onder.
Senator, do you know what percentage of private sector employees these days have defined contribution?
That would have been a good research item, Senator. I did not check into that. Most are moving to defined contribution, and many times it's because the employees want it. The opportunity there is greater. Now, they're not limited in their retirement, in their years, 16 years, or 8 years.
Right.
But usually it ends up on the other side. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. No, I think that's clear from the trend. Thanks, Senator.
Senator, you stated that when you ran for office, you had no idea that you were going to receive a pension benefit.
I did not, Senator. I'm sorry. I just really didn't realize it.
Would you be willing to relinquish it now?
Sure.
Just sign it off and you don't want anything?
Well, I don't know that, we're all happy to have whatever comes to us. I don't think there's any disputing that. My concern is that this really, if we're going to call this public service, that needs to mean something. And if we're in a realm of term limits, really, to me, it's not completely reasonable that we have a lifetime retirement benefit. I know I'm almost embarrassed for my constituents to realize that they may be paying me forever because I served in the legislature.
Well, I'm sure Mosers would be more than happy for you to relinquish all your
They
time.
probably would. I don't know exactly what the procedure is for that.
I'm sure we can figure something out.
We can probably get some co-sponsors if you're.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I understand your question, and it's true. You have to ask yourself that question when you do this. It's like, well, would I be willing to give this up? And my answer is yes. If I would be willing to move myself into this, it would include all of you.
Well,
If I did it.
but you haven't contributed to your plan.
Right.
So you wouldn't move anything into it.
I'm sorry, you lost me.
You haven't contributed to your defined benefit plan.
Oh, that's right, that's right. So you would have to start, yeah, that's right. So you wouldn't have anything.
You
You're right.
wouldn't be able to move anything. Yeah. Are you willing to do that?
You're exactly right. I think I would be. If we can pass this, I think I would be, yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Further questions?
That's what it takes.
And then we're going to pause at this time and take roll.
Senator Schaaf. Here. Wheeler. Hageman.
Here.
Onder.
Here.
Schatz. Keaveny. Shoot.
Okay, do you have any witnesses to?
I did not bring any.
Anybody wishing to testify in favor of Senate Bill 680? Come forward.
I guess the line will be short.
Okay. Anyone willing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 680?
Afternoon, committee members, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Morris, and I'm the registered lobbyist for the Association of Active and Retired Missouri State Employees. We're about 4,000 member strong organization of mostly retired, but also active, currently employed state employees. And our interest in this bill is that the General Assembly has always financially supported Mosers and the other retirement systems, although the transportation system has some issues that they have put together a plan to work out so that they're properly funded to take care of their future liabilities. And we like the idea of members of the General Assembly effectively being in the same pool as state employees, so that our interests are aligned with your interests when it comes to properly funding the retirement system. And we use this as, you know, I won't say a camel's nose under the tent issue, but to separate members of the General Assembly from the general state employees is something we would prefer not to see happen, so that we know your interest in the retirement plan is similar to ours.
So it is true, is it not, that this bill wouldn't affect any of your current members?
I believe that is true, yes.
Does anyone have any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Be sure to fill out a witness form. Anyone else to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 680?
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Kreider, and I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Retired Teachers Association. We'd like to oppose Bill 680 on many reasons. First of all, we believe that everybody ought to have a defined benefit plan in order to have retirement security and not take the risk of living in poverty. And number two is we truly believe that public employees, it's probably me, don't have the best pay scale in the world. I mean, I think we're ranked 50 in the nation as far as state employees are concerned. We're ranked 45th in the nation as far as teachers are concerned and teacher pay. And I would dare to say that we're probably ranked almost last in legislator pay. So to me, a defined benefit plan is nothing more than deferred compensation for giving of yourself and public service. And so therefore, we believe a defined benefit plan is the best way to go. And I think if you do some research, you will find that the most efficient way to provide a retirement is through a defined benefit plan. That's fact.
So are there any questions of the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Please be sure to fill out a witness form. Anyone else to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 680? Seeing none, does anyone wish to testify on an informational basis? Seeing none, this will bring to a close the hearing on Senate Bill 680. Do you have any final thoughts? Okay, at this time we'll open a hearing on Senate Bill 806. Senator Onder.
Let's see whether this microphone's better than the other one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 806, the Government Union Accountability Act. To understand this bill, I think it's first important to recognize some important differences between government sector unions and private sector unions. In the private sector, employers are either individuals or they are private corporations. In the case of government sector unions, the government, and by the extension, we the people and our constituents, are the employers. In addition, government unions are politically active often, and they often end up electing their own employers. And my bill, though, mostly addresses a third difference. The government unions are often not held to the same standards of accountability and transparency that private sector unions are accountable to. So my bill has several provisions. First, Senate Bill 806 gives Missouri government workers a voice in who represents them. Fewer than 5% of government workers have ever voted for representation by their union. You will undoubtedly hear from union representatives that the present decertification system works just fine. But this does place the burden on the worker. The decertification petition has to be signed by 30% of workers, and it is not a private system. Those people are known by the union, and the worker risks retaliation. So Senate Bill 806 calls for recertification elections every 2 years, conducted by the Board of Mediation, allowing workers to renew their current representative, choose a new representative, or choose no representative. This can be done efficiently and cost effectively. I believe at least one of my witnesses will address this point. For example, it's done every year in Wisconsin using a telephone voting system. Secondly, government unions in Missouri operate under a cloud of secrecy that really is not tolerated in the private sector unions. In 1959, in response to some very high-profile cases of corruption and embezzlement, Congress enacted the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act, which requires yearly filings by private sector unions. These so-called LM filings allow workers to know where their union dues are going. And in many cases, interested parties, often the workers themselves, but in many cases journalists, have been able to uncover corruption or misuse of funds. A recent example is the 2011 investigation of the Boilermakers Union by the KC Star. Likewise, while Missouri's Sunshine Law requires almost all government meetings to be open to the public, government bodies routinely close meetings for collective bargaining. In these meetings, elected officials set public policy, including work rules, and they spend taxpayers' money. Senate Bill 806 creates transparency by classifying those meetings as public meetings. When these meetings are open, often union members themselves are the ones who attend in the largest numbers. Finally, some government union contracts contain provisions known as evergreen clauses, which can bind parties to the original contract for years beyond the expiration of that contract. This is a problem because taxpayers, once again, the taxpayers, the public, are the employers, may be held to an agreement for many years, negotiated in good economic times, even though the economy or the particular political subdivision is now in bad economic times. So Senate Bill 806 limits contracts to 2 years. Just a comment on the fiscal note. It is based on the Department of Labor's flawed assumption that recertification elections will all be done in person. My bill allows in person as well as phone, internet, or other elections for flexibility so that the Board of Mediation can decide what will work best. In general, telephone or internet-based voting systems are going to be the most cost-effective and can be conducted for about $1.50 per person, which is about 0.1% of the average government SEIU dues for a Missouri worker. When the modest filing fees are taken into account, this bill should be revenue neutral. Also, the estimate of 21 FTEs to handle the financial reporting requirements of the bill is just ridiculous. Once the initial database is set up, It's just a matter of updating the information annually, as is the case with private sector LM filings. So in summary, House Senate Bill 806 is a pro-worker, pro-transparency bill. I thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the sponsor? No? Senator
Senator, so you're talking about the telephone voting. Explain me how that would work.
So yeah, there are a number of contractors, a number of private companies that will set up a telephone voting system in which the worker has essentially a code number, a PIN number, and they can vote by telephone, very cost effectively. And the other option, as I mentioned, is mail. Many of us, of course, have the experience of voting by mail in community association elections, for instance. So yeah, I think one of my witnesses can probably speak to that in more detail. But
yeah, concern I guess I have is, I know we're trying to secure elections, make sure that they're all safe and all legit.
Right.
This to me, and I don't even know how it would work, but to me it kind of opens a window for some kind of shenanigans, either pro or con. I'm just, that's the way I look at it.
Okay. There's no question that we have to, the utmost attention has to be paid to security of these voting systems. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none.
You can just call them up.
Okay. What we'll do is just, I guess, how many people wish to testify on Senate Bill 806 one way or the other? There's quite a few. So why don't we take somebody in favor and then take somebody in opposition and so on. Would anyone like to testify in favor of Senate Bill 806? Please come forward, tell us your name, tell us what you want us to hear, and you should have filled out a witness form.
I have some materials for the committee as well. So my name is John Wright. I am a policy researcher for the Show Me Institute. I do their labor policy. SB 806 includes a number of important pro-worker labor reforms. The financial disclosure provisions will give Missouri's government union members access to the same kinds of union financial data that private sector unions already enjoy and have enjoyed since 1959. The bans on evergreen clauses and closed-door collective bargaining between public officials and unions will help protect the interests of taxpayers. But the union elections that this bill would require are particularly important for preserving worker freedom. Imagine we voted for our public officials only one time and for a lifetime appointment. And after that initial election, there was no way to remove a governor or legislator from office. The only way to remove them from office was through a formal impeachment process. That wouldn't be fair. So why does unionization of government workers work this way? In Missouri, once a union becomes the exclusive representative for a group of public employees, that union remains in power indefinitely. Another election is not scheduled unless employees organize, petition, and gather enough signatures to have what's called a decertification election, and only then can they have another vote. Unions sometimes punish employees for attempting to have a decertification election. In one recent case, a government union successfully sued a group of employees for thousands of dollars each for attempting to decertify it. They just had it in their contract or their charter that you can't decertify. So they were successful in that. The automatic union elections proposed by this bill would solve these problems. A regular secret ballot election serves as a good check on the abuses that may occur when a representative body is not accountable to its constituents. It's what we use to keep our public officials in check, and without that safeguard, we couldn't call our form of government democracy. The benefits of union elections are clear. There will be opposition from union executives, and they may oppose these because it means they have to run for re-election, and they think they're doing a good job. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But this really benefits the rank and file union members because it allows them to hold their representatives accountable, determine for themselves what they think their union execs are doing a good job. I want to talk about the cost and the fiscal note because I did do this study called the low cost of labor reform on how you can reduce costs for this sort of union election. In the study, I found that there are 3 things you could do to significantly reduce or virtually eliminate the cost, the monetary cost. First is you could encourage the government to contract out for these services, contract out with a private provider. There's many companies that do this, and they do it for corporations, for proxy elections. They do it for homeowners associations. They do this for Harvard, Yale, and different things like that. So they can do it very efficiently, very securely. 256-bit encryption. I'm told that's military grade. 2, you allow for alternative methods to traditional paper ballots, such as telephone or internet-based voting. There's no reason to have an in-person person doing these elections. You can do it through a secure online medium. You can hold the election open a little longer and do good work. And then 3, you require the unions to pay a small filing fee to cover the remaining part of the cost. And if you drive the cost down enough and provide a good service through those other 2 recommendations, this should be less than 1% of the dues collected for each month, for each dues collection period. So this bill incorporates these recommendations, and if properly implemented, I believe it can deliver the benefits of a more accountable government union without forcing taxpayers to pay for it. So this bill provides, and there's a couple other things. People asked why in November? Why leave this open for 7 days? The reason there is that people are generally accustomed to voting in November and even numbered years. If you have it at that time, you have the most open, transparent election possible. The April elections that. Am I doing something?
Just need to put it closer to you.
Okay. The April elections that school boards often have a really low turnout. So having them in November on even numbered years gets you the biggest turnout. I feel that helps individual workers vote their conscience and vote what they want. There's flexibility with lower costs, but that's the bulk of my testimony. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy.
Does anyone have any questions of this witness? Seeing none.
Thank you. I have a question for the witness and the sponsor. You're both supportive of the photo ID legislation that's moving through the chamber, is that right?
I haven't looked at the details of the particular bill that's moving through right now, but I'm broadly supportive of photo ID.
So why is it not necessary to have photo ID in these elections?
Well, because in these elections, we know exactly who the members are who are eligible to vote. They can be provided with a secure, user ID, password, PIN code, what have you. And you just don't have, in these elections, you just don't have, and your numbers are nowhere near what they are in, say a statewide gubernatorial election. So, it's just a different
number of unique numbers that we could.
Well, no, but if you put in the wrong unique number when you went to vote, your vote would be rejected, of course. So.
Right.
Do we in Missouri have sort of right to work for government employees?
No, we don't.
So if I'm working for the government and there's a union in my area, then in order to work for the government in that area, I have to be a member.
It depends on what the collective bargaining agreement says. So in some cases, the collective bargaining agreement requires that. I've seen firefighters' contracts where they assessed agency fees. SEIU state contracts have conditional agency fees. They're not active, but those provisions will become live if a certain condition is obtained. But none of the state contracts currently require agency fees. So it's legal to force people to join the union and to pay agency fees. Yes,
in order to work for the government.
In order to work for the government, but that's not how the contracts are.
Wait, I'm seeing somebody shake his head.
No. I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. Anyone else to have a question? Seeing none, thank you. Be sure to fill out a witness form. Would anyone like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 806?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. We would speak in opposition to Senate Bill 806. I'll have a brief bit of more general remarks, but while it's maybe fresh in the committee's mind, question asking about compulsory union membership, and I'll be speaking on behalf of my association, our members, all of whom work in public schools, and the law that pertains to us applies to every one of the 100,000 employees in our Missouri public schools. Since 1983, the law has been very clear that any deduction from the paycheck of a school employee, teacher or otherwise, must be done if the board policy even allows for it. And the board has that option not to allow for that. But if they allow for deductions other than what's required under the tax law and garnishments and being docked for missed days, then it must be done specifically as directed by the employee. And so that's been the law since 1983. It was signed by Governor Bond. The Senate voted unanimously in favor of that law, and the House had over 150 votes in favor. So there is absolutely no notion, and never has been in Missouri public schools, of any sense of compulsory union membership. And as a matter of fact, of course, there are 3 associations that represent public employees in the schools, primarily Missouri National Education Association, Missouri State Teachers Association, AFT Missouri. But out of the 100,000 school employees, I would estimate, based upon the numbers we think we know about the 3 organizations, about 2/3 are members. Many are not, especially newer teachers. They're coming into the profession. They may either not have an idea of which association they might want to join, the benefits of doing so. They may not necessarily know that they're going to stay in the profession of teaching. They try it out for a couple of years. They think, whoa, this is maybe not what I thought. I thought I was going to have a lot more flexibility in how I teach. Right now we're weighed down by federal and state policy. And so, yeah, that's totally at the discretion at any moment, whether and that has to do with being a member of an association and further participation in particular in support of, for instance, something like a political action program. That's always going to be an extra voluntary thing. So there's no compulsion. The law has been very clear on that since 1983. So I wanted to share a couple of things. One of them is, when we hear this kind of bill, I hear kind of a sense that somehow there's something dark and secret about the work of our association. The members, the rank and file members, don't know what's going on. Since 2010, it's been a part of my job. I'm just a staff person for Missouri NEA. It's been a part of my job to write up every single session night a document that talks specifically about the activities of the legislature that have either just happened or about to happen that pertain to the issues that our delegate assembly, elected representatives, choose to have as priorities in terms of legislative action. And since 2012, that's gone out to essentially all of the members for whom we have a home email address. So I'm sending out an email to 27,000 folks every single night. I'm shocked at the number of that I see almost no unsubscribes. It's kind of almost shocking to me. Our members know what our association is doing in the legislative arena, and if there were some concern about an issue and the position, I would hear about it. When I go to meetings where our folks are meeting with legislators, we had a meeting like that just this weekend with well over 100 of our members. We were all talking about how do we all work together. We had board members, we had administrative guests, we had our members, we had the legislators. We're focused on good education, excellent public service for the kids. And so that's really where my members are focused. They have to be. Teaching is really a calling. When we look at this bill, there's a lot that could be said. I'm going to focus. The big picture thing is, right now we're able to work collaboratively. Our locals in many districts across the state, we have good working relationships where we're working with school boards, where we have a contract in place. There's an ownership that comes from that, where for the board president of the local association, there's been a process by which that was negotiated. There's a process by which it was ratified, and an agreement. This is what we're doing together. We're very concerned that this bill will damage, and that the collateral damage in the attempt to do whatever this bill is really trying to do. The collateral damage is those stable bargaining relationships. That's why we have a federal labor law since 1935. It's not just about the constitutional protection for the rights of the employees, which is a great feature of our Missouri Constitution, but it's also about the success of businesses, and in our context, the success in providing great public service and great public schools. And so we were very concerned that this bill will make those kinds of relationships more at risk less stable, less something that can be counted upon. Moreover, uniquely from the perspective of the educators, there's the issue of how this relates to the election process. One thing, that representation elections don't happen automatically in every bargaining unit. It has to happen organically because the employees actually ask for it up front. But teachers and law enforcement are not covered. We're covered under the constitutional provision. We're not covered under 105, the public sector bargaining law. So that means that the election process is not under the State Board of Mediation by force of state law. We're exempted from that. That leaves the school boards and the local control of the school board to decide what that process looks like. I live in Columbia Public Schools. The teachers are represented by our Columbia local. Columbia Public Schools School Board looked at that question because they said, well, we've got a request. We're going to have a representation election. They got to make the call. They got to decide what process works best for that school district. They chose the local League of Women Voters to be the proctors of that election. They chose it in time, a place, and a manner that worked for the district, that worked for all of the members of the bargaining unit, and they conducted that election. This bill, in addition to demanding an election that nobody wants on the general election day, completely obliterates the kind of finesse with which that process was put in place by the local school board in the get-go, because it's an entirely different election process from how we got there. And so for that reason, we think that that is a very troubling provision. We think that overall the bill is going to be threatening the kind of the stability and the workability of these bargaining relationships that really do benefit both the board and the employees working together. And for those various reasons, we think that the committee should not move forward on this bill. I'm happy to answer questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Please be sure to fill out a witness form. Anyone wishing to testify in favor of Senator Abrams?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Michael Hafner. I am Director of Government Relations for the Missouri Century Foundation. And just really quick for some background, Missouri Century Foundation is an organization that was established last year, January 2015, to promote free market, good open government, individual liberty, and forward-looking policies that will ensure the health and stability of our state for the next generation. This bill is a response to the significant increase in government union membership over the last decade. We simply believe it is time for Missouri to consider common sense, pro-worker reforms put forth in Senate Bill 806. Those who are testifying in opposition today will claim this legislation is anti-union. It's not. It's not right to work. It doesn't prevent unions from existing in any way. We firmly believe that a union should exist and work for its members. And Senate Bill 806 only includes reforms that will benefit the government union workers of our state by holding unions accountable to their members. This legislation is simply designed to bring accountability and transparency to government unions. I'd like to address just the fiscal note that Senator Onder addressed earlier. I'd like to challenge the validity of that fiscal note. This bill includes measures that would make the elections virtually cost neutral to the state. It's been said before, internet-based voting, online voting, also televoting that can be done securely and again at little to no cost. The current decertification process can be lengthy and quite frankly bureaucratic. Senator Onder mentioned, right now a worker must file a petition and gather signatures of 30% of the bargaining unit as a showing of interest. Then there are 2 more administrative steps after that. This bill gives workers a greater voice in choosing their representation. It provides more transparency for workers to know how their union spends their money. Just to reiterate the elements of this bill, requiring representation renewal elections held every 2 years to allow workers to choose their union. Unions to competently represent their members should have no problem in this area being recertified. It requires collective bargaining sessions to be open to the public. At the very least, our belief is that the public has a right to know how their money is being spent. And it also includes provisions to reform financial disclosing, requiring government unions to file financial reports, which simply, again, holds government unions to the same standards as private sector unions. I thank you for your time and happy to help answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for this witness?
I'm still going back to this election thing. So who decides if they're gonna have a phone or a mail or an in-person election? Who's the person that says, this is the kind of election we're gonna have?
The Board of Mediation, State Board of Mediation.
Board mediation, yeah, okay. And so they would then decide how they're gonna fund it.
Yeah, so.
I mean, I guess this is a funding question for them.
Right.
And so the money would come from the workers or from the
So
state?
so the bill includes a provision for relatively modest fees to be paid by the exclusive representatives seeking re-election, the union, to pay for these elections. So it should be cost neutral, provided the Board of Mediation chooses a cost-effective way of conducting these elections. And again, the bill includes, in-person, mail, internet, and phone voting to give the Board of Mediation flexibility to choose the best, most secure, most cost-effective method, and that's.
So then does the Board of Mediation then also oversee and actually, someone's got to be the one that says, here's your number, Senator, call this number and that's your number. Someone issues that number, holds the election. Does the Board of Mediation do that too, or they sub that out to somebody else?
Generally speaking, and in the way it is done in Wisconsin, they do subcontract out with companies that do these elections for a number of entities, not just in the labor context, but as mentioned, everything from proxy elections in corporate America to as Harvard University to homeowners associations and so on. So there are private companies that can do this.
Would you or any of the witnesses that you have, would they be able to provide me a list of companies and some, let's say, jobs that they've done and what they've charged to do that?
Sure. And some of that is in this publication that the first witness provided, labor reform, that you have in your handouts. But yeah, we can get more information to you on that. Thanks, Senator.
Follow up to Senator Wheeland. You heard Mr. Fajan say that the teachers are not under the Board of Mediation. And so I'm just wondering if, given that.
So his point, right, yes, I believe his point was, and I'll stand corrected if I misstate this, is that right now, when the teachers want to have an election, they can choose, for instance, the board of the League of Women Voters. Under this law, the Board of Mediation would choose the method of election. And I think uniformity makes sense. I think there are probably cost savings to the board.
So even though they're not regulated by that board or whatever.
Well, they are covered by a different law. As you remember, in the 1960s, 1965, the General Assembly passed a collective bargaining law that excluded police officers and teachers. And then in 2007, the Missouri Supreme Court ruled that teachers and police officers too had a right to collectively bargain. So that's, so the former group is under the Board of Mediation, the latter there are loose standards. For instance, my own county, St. Charles County, has its own collective bargaining law that applies to teachers and police officers. But the bill would just call for the State Board of Mediation to be the ones in charge of all those recert elections.
And nothing else.
And nothing else. That's right. That's right. It doesn't in any way apply the 1965 law to teachers or police officers. Thanks.
Senator Hageman, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quick question. You talked about opening up the process to, it sounded like it was opening up the sunshine law to allow for the collective bargaining process to be open to the public. I mean, is that correct? Is that in section 105.570 where it refers to the 610, is that the sunshine laws?
That is correct.
Okay.
Right.
So you're getting the sunshine law to say that this is not something to be closed in,
Right.
the due process of, just probably would be closed under, not negotiations, but just HR type of issues.
Right. So, and there is precedent for this. I believe Columbia Public Schools have opened their collective bargaining agreements to the public, as has the Monarch Fire District in St. Louis County. And honestly, it's usually well received by union members. In fact, union members are the ones most interested in what's going on their behalf, and they show up in large numbers, I'm told.
You're actually asking for the negotiations to be opened up to the public, not just the action that came out of the closed meetings, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Clarifies. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Senator Schaaf.
I just want to clarify, under section 610, the sunshine law, any board, any organization can open those exemptions that it's allowed, they can open those to the public. That doesn't mean that we need a law to say that they don't have to. They're allowed to have those exemptions if they want to have them open to the public. If these members of the union want to hear those negotiations, want to be privy to them, they can have the union open those negotiations. You don't need a law to change that.
Well, the members don't, a rank and file member doesn't have a right to ask that a meeting that, say a municipality and a union are going to have a collective bargaining agreement. A rank and file member of that union doesn't have any.
Well, certainly the
right
members,
to
as you said, if the members are the people interested, they could go to their leadership and say, we would like for you to try to get this meeting open. There's nothing that requires it to be closed.
Well, I think you get to the heart of the whole point of this law is to create more accountability of the exclusive representatives to their own members.
Look, I'm a big fan of transparency
Sure.
and open government, but I also understand the need for negotiations to be closed sometimes, and this is going to take away that.
Well, certainly this wouldn't take away. I mean, certainly disciplinary proceedings would be closed and so on. But strategy meetings ahead of the collective bargaining agreement, explicitly in the bill, can still be closed. But the point is that in the case of these bargaining agreements, the employer is the public, and the public has a right to see what's being done on its behalf with its tax dollars.
Well, that happens in negotiations. Let's talk about, I used to serve on the school board. So let's talk about negotiation for land or buildings. And if those had been open, that definitely could have changed the outcome of the costs of those buildings or lands. So there is a value, as is noted in the Sunshine Law, for closing meetings during negotiation processes, because being open can impact the outcome. If certainly the outcome at the end of the day, the result of those closed sessions, those negotiation sessions, is always made public. It has to be made public within 72 hours. That's the law. What I'm saying is you don't give negotiators the option to close this for whatever. I've never been in a union negotiation. Even when I was on a school board, during that time, we did not have collective bargaining in my district. So I've never participated in that. I don't know what goes on. I don't know what information may then become public that precludes one side or the other from doing as good a job as it could for its interests. So I'm concerned about that particular aspect of this legislation, because I think that we may not realize, and I'm sure we'll hear from some people, what those unintended consequences of forcing these to be open may be.
Well, thank you, Senator. No, I guess our point is that my point is that in these meetings, public policy is made, and the public has a right to be aware. So, thank you.
Other questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Sure, fill out a witness form. Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 806?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, senators, members of the committee. I appreciate the chance to testify. My name is Bradley Harmon. I'm president of Local 6355, the Communications Workers of America. I'm representing my union, and also Mike Lewis, who's president of Missouri AFL-CIO, asked me to testify today too for him, so I guess I'm also speaking for Missouri AFL-CIO. We're opposed to this legislation. My union represents employees who work for the Missouri Department of Social Services, Missouri Department of Health. I personally come out of the Children's Division of Missouri Department of Social Services. I noted before coming in here today that this bill's sponsor has legislation that he's filed to deal with victims of human trafficking. I would suggest that if we're really interested in helping state employees and the people that we serve, people like the victims of human trafficking who employees of the Children's Division work with in some part of the state every day, that there are a lot better places that we could start looking than placing enormous bureaucratic burdens on the most poorly paid state employees in the country that create real obstacles to our being able to organize and effectively advocate for ourselves. In St. Charles County, where the sponsor of the bill is from, more than 35% of the people who work for the Children's Division quit their job with the state last year. That means that there were vacant seats in offices that should have been investigating reports of human trafficking and other concerns related to the welfare of children in the state. But what we're talking about now is the right of those employees to form an association, maintain an association on their own. We're not talking about the real problems that are facing state employees. That's extremely frustrating. On this bill, there's a lot to say about it. I guess the first thing that I would say is it was instructive to me to hear some of the witnesses talk about the concerns that they have for employees who are signing a petition to decertify the union. It's true that nobody should be coerced or discriminated against or harassed in any way because they are taking an action to support a labor organization in a public employment place, or because they're taking an action to oppose a labor organization in a public place. There's no place for coercion or harassment because people are coming down on either side of having a union. Totally agree with that. My question would be, the exact same sets of anxieties that apply to signing a decertification petition for a union apply to signing a certification petition for a union. Employees get nervous about it. They're afraid to sign the petition saying that we want the union here. So if the spirit of this bill is really to create accountability and to ensure choices for state employees, I would wonder why the bill doesn't do that by requiring an election for all public employees every 2 years, whether they have a union or not, on whether or not they would like to have representation. If the effect of this bill is not to try to place burdens in front of unions, if the effect of this bill is really only to protect state employees and allow us to exercise, public employees generally, to allow us to exercise our right to associate in a union or not to associate in a union, I don't understand why this bill wouldn't apply both ways. But the only concern that this bill has is if there's a union already in place. Now let me tell you how amazingly difficult it would be for somebody like my coworkers in the Children's Division to comply with the terms of this bill. So in St. Charles County, they're down 35% of the children's service workers that they're supposed to have in that office. So the workers who are there, the 65% who are left, who are covering the caseload of one of the largest counties in this state, we still have to deal with the hotline calls that come in. When there are children who there are concerns about, we have to go out and make sure they're safe. Kids who are in foster homes, we have to make sure that they're in a good place and that it's moving through the system. We have to do that no matter how many staff are actually in the office at a time. We're incredibly overworked already. Most of the people who quit working for the Children's Division cite the fact that they're incredibly overworked as one of the reasons why they're leaving the state. So this bill then says anyone who doesn't vote in the election to recertify the union has voted against recertification of the union. Because under the terms of this bill, a majority of the entire bargaining unit is required to vote in support of the legislation in order for the union to be retained. So if you don't vote, we represent 6,000 employees at the Department of Social Services. If we had a recertification election, we won 2,999 votes for the union, 1 vote against the union. Under this legislation, because we did not carry a majority of the entire bargaining unit, we would be decertified. So we just heard the sponsor of the bill say that if there was a phone voting system and I entered in the wrong unique identifier, my vote wouldn't count. That means that my vote is a no vote. That's a real problem with this legislation. It's fundamentally anti-democratic. If you are against labor organizations, the people elected you, and that's the people's business who elected you, and I might disagree with you, but you were elected by the people, and I respect that. I would hope that whether you were against labor organizations or for them, that you would be against bad legislation. And this is bad legislation. No one knows how much money this will cost. The Department of Labor says it will cost a lot of money. The bill sponsors say it won't. It's all hypothetical. No one knows how this voting process will work. This is a bad bill. Wherever you come down on public employee organizations, this is bad law. And it will end up in the courts. It builds into itself. It gives a government agency the power to write rules to enforce itself. That sounds like big government to me. That sounds like a major expansion of government. It requires public employee union members through their organization to pay a tax in order to have an election to vote. I thought that we were against imposing taxes on people here. I'll close. One of the very first Supreme Court cases in the history of this country, Marbury versus Madison, one of the fundamental opinions in Marbury versus Madison was that the power to tax is the power to destroy. This bill imposes taxes on one set of workers in this state, workers who are already underpaid and overworked. It creates burdens for them that will be difficult for them to meet. And then if they fail to meet those burdens, it takes away our associations. Our associations, state employees, we don't get to bargain over our pay. We don't get to bargain over our health insurance. The reason I had to run up to the front of this hearing line is that at 4 o'clock, Department of Social Services appropriations committees are meeting downstairs, and I need to get in front of those committees and talk about how state employees are the 50th worst paid state employees in the country, and that needs to change. We'd much rather deal with that issue. We'd much rather have the ability to really freely choose whether or not we want to have unions. This bill imposes enormous burdens on that. It's a bad law. I really hope you vote against it.
Are there questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Please be sure to fill out a witness form.
Thank you, sir.
At this point, I'd like to give someone in favor of the bill to have an opportunity to testify. Senate Bill 806, in favor.
My name is Jeremy Keaveny with Missouri Alliance for Freedom. I'm going to go on record and support this motion.
Okay. Any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to the bill?
Good afternoon, Chairman, honorable members of the committee. I'll be general and brief. There's been a lot of ground covered here. Clark Brown with the Service Employees International Union State Council of Locals. Directly related to the issue, I might say, out of 10,000 members, we have 13 public employee contracts that this would potentially impact. 3 of those are state of Missouri contracts, or probation parole officers. We have a contract with professionals in the mental health department, and corrections has probation assistance there. I can tell you or clarify the record, for the record that was previously stated, we have no fair share fees agreements in any of those contracts. It's all voluntary membership. Frankly, I don't know where that information comes from. The state of Missouri probably would never agree to do mandatory or compulsory membership. So I want to be clear for that record. Hope that I can be helpful about this. I am also a union rep, and I don't run elections. I bargain contracts, so have a knowledge of that too for some of this. So I think just a few points to the message generally. The issue or the necessity for this. I mean, the sponsor and proponents of this want to propose. Frankly, we're talking about a policy here that's about employee choice to have these elections, and about the rest of it about accountability for employees. But frankly, somebody already stated, there is already a system in play here. If workers don't like their unions, and this comes around quicker than you think, any time a contract reopens or expires, that's the eligible point. They run the election. I tell you, 30% comes easier than you think. I had one a couple of years ago, and frankly, it's about, like, you're not saying you're not going to have a union, you sign a petition to say you want an election to figure that out, and it's done pretty simply. So that system is in play there. I gotta tell you, the real picture when we look at this is more than about 2-year or biannual elections. We saw this legislation last year. This thing has a whole host of bureaucratic, broad-reaching reform policies in it, in our thoughts. I hear other proponents that say this is an anti-union, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it has nothing that terminates the union, but I can certainly tell you it's very obtrusive and oppressing type of policies for public employee unions to try to comply to. Let's say to the part of the elections, if this was one-sided, to allow the decision for currently union workers to have these public elections, frankly, there are 637 sitting there now. That's last year when I asked the State Board of Mediation. If we were to extend this like the CWA's testimony and run elections, why are we one-sided on this? Why aren't we letting every public agency have election? We're going to see 637, and my estimate, 3 times that after we go through a couple of election cycles, because we get the opportunity to tell every public agency, you have a right to select a union where they've never had one. And I didn't plan that, but CWA went there, but I think we need to say if it really wasn't one-sided, we'd be doing elections everywhere with this. So let's say there is a piece about then, just 2 pieces. There's other stuff in this. I know that there's stuff about meetings. I don't, frankly, it's uncomfortable, but not here to make points about it. There's stuff, a whole host of stuff about reporting. I can tell you SAIU reports all that because we're public-private, so we report everything federally, these LM2s and so forth. But there's 2 pieces. This election stuff, we're tagging this right on general election day. I think that we want Missouri citizens, Missouri workers, to have their attention to their civil duty to vote about elected officials. Now we're thrown in the middle of 700 elections plus taking place, quite possibly at the election poll sites. I have no idea what that spells out there. I can tell you the piece about the absolute majority or the entire bargaining unit voting. You guys in the FOP said this on the House version hearing yesterday. If you guys were to be elected by absolute Missouri or the total university voters, most of you probably wouldn't be here. I mean, what do we have, 40% voter turnout? That's all skewed. It just doesn't work right. Also, and I want to emphasize this, that there's a piece of this message I want to resonate. We can't do this. This isn't right. It's a constitutional right to have your union, to have collective bargaining rights for public employees. It's clearly determined. It's a constitutional right to vote too. And for a decade, you guys have been arguing about Missouri voter rights. And in fact, we want to talk about a constitutional right for union voting rights. And we're going to charge a fee for this. It's totally wrong. This is union membership money that the dues pay in, dues payers, the members pay in, that you're going to use to subsidize the cost of this. And I tell you, I think the sponsor said it's very modest, and I think that came from last year's bill, had only the election had a $400,000 note on it, 0 to 400,000. I think if you counted the 637 agencies and the fee right there, it was in order to neutralize the cost on that election system there. But I lastly say, just like on the election side of it, just like voting in Missouri, I want that government run. I don't want 760 temporary employees running all over the state to run my elections. And I'd feel that way if I was just a member. I mean, I'd like, if this isn't an official thing done by the state board, they've been doing this for 60 years in Missouri. It's very scary to think about 760 temporary employees doing this on one little cycle of 7 days, and how they're going to hire those up, what's the criteria of those folks. It's very suspicious. Anyway, I want to point out too, we have 3 union contracts with the state, and talking about the terms of the contract, we have 3-year length terms with the state. Now, I don't see the state here to testify on this, but I don't know that they want to start entering biannual, every 2-year contract terms. I think that employers in many cases want the longest contract they can get. They don't want to go through bargaining contracts every year or every 2 years. Frankly, I think that's a real burden to the state. I think that most employers are, whether they're public or private, want the longest term of agreement they can get. So regulating the terms to 2 years seems to be an issue. I will tell you too, that is questionable that we are taking away a collective bargaining decision anyway. That's something that the employer and the union says, what do you want to talk about the term of this agreement? 3 years? We're willing to do a 5-year agreement. You know, you've heard of them before. So I think you're trying to statutorily regulate the term of an agreement there that's probably not right. Fiscal question, I think the math, finally we saw the fiscal note an hour before the House bill version yesterday. I was really questioning even last year's fiscal cost on the election side piece of it, being 400 grand. So I can tell you 6 million to me, no, doesn't sound unreasonable by the time that fiscal note says there needs to be 21 staff. It probably does. If you're going to hire 760 temporary employees out there, you need the state board certification judges at those sites or however the system's going to work. I appreciate that. I think that Ian was saying, you know, to us, all this is about imposing a burden to employees and employers. I don't think they want these elections. I don't think they want to prepare for them. I don't think they want to bargain every 2 years, to be honest with you. So to spend $6 million of taxpayers' money on what appears to us a problem that doesn't exist, I think it's wrong, and that's the position we want to express to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone wishing to ask any questions of this witness? Seeing none.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also leaving a record for Painters District Council 58, also opposed to the legislation.
Anyone else wishing to testify in favor of Senate Bill 806?
Rachel Payton with the American Street Cross-State News 31 of 34.
Okay. Now, any questions of this witness? Seeing none. Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 806?
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Martin Raffanon. I'm a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and I'm here on behalf of the Workers' Rights Board of Missouri Jobs with Justice in St. Louis and in Kansas City, and over 200 faith and labor folks who are in a faith and labor alliance across the state as well. We are opposed to, I want to bring, and we'll be delivering 15 letters from clergy around the state in opposition to this legislation. Missouri's public employees do not need this law. It would impose significant and unnecessary barriers on Missouri's hardworking public employees who want to belong to a labor union.
I just want to remind you, we don't read our testimony in our committee here. If you could just, we'll pass it out, but we prefer not to have that testimony. Just
from our,
just summarize it.
Absolutely. From our standpoint, it wasn't going to be long anyway. So from our standpoint, we believe that this puts an unnecessary burden on public employees who are already undercompensated in our state. We believe that they need the full ability to have a voice in the workplace. We believe that this legislation undermines their ability to organize and collectively bargain, and that is one of the reasons why we as clergy across the state want to support that effort on their behalf and keep this legislation from being an obstruction to their ability to organize, collectively bargain, pursue a better life for themselves, their families, and our communities. We believe that this is morally wrong to keep these workers or to in any way keep these workers from fighting for themselves, for their families, and our communities. And we hope that you as members of this committee will oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Be sure to fill out a witness form. At this point, anyone wishing to testify in favor of Senate Bill 806?
This is an interesting day. I agree with something that Shomi Institute does.
Mike Reed, Missouri School Board Association, specifically speaking on the fact that presently school boards have, and our association has put out different ways for school boards to hold elections. This would codify this because, as the sponsor said, firefighters and teachers are outside the Modifies section.
And this would codify the way that we hold elections, whether or not boards have legal women voters, which may or may not be in existence in the community, other community organizations. But one of the biggest things that we want to make sure, we have collective bargaining for our employees. We just want to make sure that there's certain parameters in which we know it's to work. So,
Do you think that this would codify it in a way that you?
at least all of our members know how to do it.
Okay. Any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. At this time, anyone wishing to testify in opposition to this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Senators, I'm Sherwood Smith. I'm the president of Missouri State Council of Firefighters. We represent 6,700 members across Missouri, firefighters, EMS workers, dispatchers, and prosecuting attorneys. We speak against this bill. And there's been a lot of points made, so I'll be brief. But I would like to point out our members. One is the tax that, and I'm calling, those are my words, the fiscal note to this. 1% would probably be more than half of what our members have received in the last 2 years. Also, I would say that I'd like to point out that the vast majority of our local leadership work for free. So to add this bureaucratic burden onto them to fill all these papers, to make these meetings and things like that, these are things that you're asking our men and women of the Missouri State Council of Firefighters to add another burden. I would even go as far as to let you know that their cell phones aren't even paid for by their communities. Obviously, we represent small towns and large municipalities as well, and the vast majority of our members are from smaller locals. And so I would like to say that to add this burden, to add these bureaucratic steps for whatever reason, it's just one more step to add onto the things that the men and women, your first responders, do every day. Obviously, our days are filled with training and those kinds of things. We have to train, we have to read, even when we're at home. To add these, to me, very unnecessary steps. I just don't see the purpose. And also, my last point would be I heard them talk about the evergreen clause. I will tell you that the evergreen clauses that I have been associated with, the vast majority of those are welcomed by the communities, the political subdivisions that have written and signed off on those. It gives continuity. It gives stability, and it gives the appearance and the ability for the unions, the members in the municipalities or political subdivisions to have protocols that are met. Obviously, we are a paramilitary organization, most of us, and so this just adds to the likelihood of any emergency outcome being successful by having protocols in place. And those evergreen clauses are looked to and agreed to and welcomed.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone wishing to ask any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. You should have done the witness forum. Anyone wishing to testify in favor of this bill, Senate Bill 806? Okay, at this point, well, seeing none, so we've had an even number of those in favor and those opponents. At this time, please, we'd like to have anyone else who wishes to testify. I would just like to caution everybody, please, at this point, try to keep it brief and don't reiterate points that have already been said, just for the sake of time, since we've had sort of a fair, representation of everyone. So please, anyone else wishing to testify, come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, senators and friends. Jeff Rohr, testifying on behalf of Fraternal Order Police Lodge 68, representing over 1,100 police officers of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department and Lambert Airport Police Department. I will be brief by my standards, which will seem long by everyone else's standards. First of all, it's a little bit of good news to the members of the committee. There is life after the legislature. For me, it's been a difficult life representing police officers in some very trying times. I have people ask me all the time about my legislative service and what it was like, and I tell them that universally the legislature is populated by well-intended people who are self-sacrificing and interested in making Missouri a better place. And when we get things wrong, it's because we have a misunderstanding about a particular issue or a particular problem that we have here in the state. And I think that that is a perfect description here. I know the senator, the sponsor of the bill. I served with him in the House. He's a good man and is, I'm certain, well-intended here, but his bill is flawed, and I think misses the mark on behalf of not only public employees in Missouri, but the people who are served by them, the people whose lives and property are protected by them. And the bill is underlined by this notion that public employee unions are corrupt, secretive, that there is such a thing as compulsory union membership in Missouri, and most of all that the idea, the notion that public employee unions are these greedy entities trying to reach into taxpayers' pockets through the government entity with which they are negotiating, which is far, far from the truth. As you know, I represent rank and file police officers, and St. Louis police officers are about $10,000 behind the average salary for the region, the St. Louis region. Yet, our top priority going into negotiations is never money, it's never benefits, it's always the safety of our members. And that is the history of labor unions, both public and private in the United States, for well over a century, since the miners came out of the ground after the Cripple Creek disaster, since the factory workers came out of the factories after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. The history of unions has been universally the same throughout the last century of this country, and that is that our interest is in protecting the safety and the workplace conditions of those men and women that we represent, doing very difficult jobs for the people that they service. I don't know how often those of you sitting on the panel get a call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning from a police chief. But I got to tell you, my heart sinks because I know that when I get that call that one of the men or women that I represent has either gotten hurt in the line of duty or had to use deadly force in the line of duty. Neither one of them a very good outcome, a bad day of work, so to speak. By interfering with my ability to represent those people on a continuous basis with some continuity and understanding that the same organization is going to be negotiating a contract for them that has safety parameters and very strong ones. As I said, we've given up a lot of economic issues to get a say in workplace safety and to make sure that our men and women go home safe every night. It is our #1 priority. So to set obstacles in the way of that, and in this case, I will tell you, I think they are inassailable obstacles. As Clark from the SEIU pointed out, there is nobody up here that would want to stand for election under the rules in this bill. That you have to get an absolute majority of everybody that's eligible to vote. That's not just when there's 2 people on the ballot. Under this bill, there can be multiple unions on the ballot and also the choice of no representation. And you have to reach a absolute majority, and there's a supposition that by not voting, you're voting for no representation. If the same supposition existed for us when we ran for public office, that people who weren't voting didn't want to be represented, there'd be a bunch of empty seats up here, there'd be a bunch of empty seats out on the House and Senate floor. There is such a thing as voter apathy, both in unions and in public elections, and we need to recognize them, and that this bill does not recognize that. I'm just asking for the opportunity to make sure the folks that protect you while you're home in bed at night, sleeping safely, get back home to their bed where they can sleep safely. And I've got to tell you that if every 2 years we've got to not only stand for a new election, even if our members don't want it, and then get everybody out to vote, which is a daunting task, whether you're talking about public or private elections, and are limited in the length of contracts that we can negotiate, that is an obstacle that I don't think anybody should have to have in front of them to do the good work for the people that we do, that firefighters do, that teachers do, that public employees who take care of our seniors and our kids do every day. I don't think that this is a reasonable path. Now the sponsor has keyed in on something that I completely agree with, that whether you're petitioning to form a union or petitioning to decertify a union, that should be a process that is without challenges, without obstacles, and that can be done with anonymity and without fear of retaliation. That's the real problem here, and the problem that we should be addressing, not the problem that we've got imagined in this bill. And then finally, I'll just, to speak to the fiscal note, everyone else has got up here and said that they take exception to the fiscal note. I do too. I think it's underestimated by tens of billions of dollars. We have a Article 1, Section 29 of the Missouri Constitution, part of our Bill of Rights, holds the fundamental right of all citizens of Missouri to join together and bargain collectively. And when we place obstacles in the way of a constitutional right, a fundamental right that's in the state's Bill of Rights, you can believe me when I say that it's going to be ripe for legal challenge, and that there's a number of these provisions in this bill that won't stand for legal challenge and will cost the state of Missouri millions and millions of dollars to defend. So my union is in firm opposition to this bill. We would love to work with the sponsor on legislation that gave cops and teachers access to state board of mediation, so everybody's working off the same understanding and is under the same regulatory rubric. And we'd be glad to work with the sponsor to make decertification a easier process for people who are unhappy with union representation to undertake. As a matter of fact, the union that represented the sergeants in the St. Louis Police Department was recently decertified, and we didn't think it was right that sergeants that were working with the police department had to put their name out there for management and a union to potentially retaliate against. So that's our commitment. That's our understanding of the bill, and we are firmly opposed to it.
Does anyone have any questions of this witness? I can tell you, as my former colleague in the House, definitely have what it takes to be in the Senate.
To bluster?
To be able to bluster.
That guy on your right looks familiar to me. I don't know where I've seen him before, but he looks darn familiar to me.
Is it true that you have common ground with the sponsor, portions of this bill that you would support?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the really unfair portions of this bill is, as has been pointed out by others, that cops, teachers, and National Guardsmen are statutorily barred from access to state board of mediation. That means, and it's really not a situation that every school board, every municipality, every county, and the state, with regards to state troopers and National Guardsmen, has to set up their own framework, place by place, piece by piece, and then have to go to court to have that challenge because they almost always get it wrong. To me, the School Board Association and the Missouri Police Chiefs Association ought to be in front of the legislature on bended knee, asking for you to put cops and firefighters, or cops and teachers under the State Board of Mediation, under 105-510, so that everybody is under the same regulatory framework, and that there are consistency and an understanding of what's expected of each of us, and that there is also a framework for decertification that's fair and transparent.
And did I hear you say that you believe that you would support having more uniform voting rules, or having the vote be conducted in a way that's secret, fair, better?
Right, and we've heard other witnesses say that whether you're petitioning for a union or petitioning to decertify a union, you should never have to fear retaliation or alienation or.
So that's also common ground that you have.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other areas of common ground?
Well, I'll tell you one area that I didn't mention where I think we're really far apart is this idea that contract negotiations ought to be public because the citizens have a right to know how their money's being spent. The money's not spent at those contract negotiations. All we do when we're going back and forth with representatives of the local government body is reaching tentative agreements on what we're going to take back to our members for a very public ratification vote and what they're going to take back to the administrative body, whether it's a school board or city council.
You disagree on that point.
Right, but I think that his intent is right. That people should know what that money, how that money is being spent. But in fact, they do know because those contracts are voted for in a public setting by the government body, by the union, and just as Senator Schaaf so definitely pointed out, there's no other contract that a city or a county or school board negotiates that it negotiates in the light of the day, because that would undermine that negotiation. There would be no way that you would would not have outside forces from your competitors in a negotiation undermining those negotiations if you did them in a public forum.
Okay, and do you think that there are other areas where you would be in agreement with the sponsor of this bill?
Absolutely, I plan on visiting you afterwards.
Good. This is the kind of bill that if you want to move anything, you almost have to find common ground and then put that into a bill. Any other questions of the sponsor? I mean, of this witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, good to see you down.
Oh, yes. Anyone else wishing to testify on this bill? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Susan Barkulis, and I'm with Council 72 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And I'd like to submit testimony from our president of the council, who's also a habilitation worker in St. Louis, in opposition of this bill.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Be sure to fill out a witness form. Anyone else wishing to testify on this bill? I'll just reiterate, please don't reiterate points that have already been made. Tell us who you are.
Community Streeter with Madison, Missouri. On behalf of our 78,000 members, we are in favor.
In favor?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify on? She said.
United Missouri.
United for Missouri.
United Missouri?
United for.
United for Missouri.
Okay.
Another one of them.
Anyone else wishing to testify on this bill? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Rachel Greathouse. I am a legislative intern with Empower Missouri. We oppose SB 806, and just two quick statements. We believe, as said earlier, that our state workers are the lowest paid and very understaffed. It's incredibly difficult. So we believe that they would benefit from a organized voice, in our public workers to provide specific life. So that's all I have to say.
Any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Be sure to fill out the witness form. Next. Coming forward, Luana. How are you? Good.
Luana Gifford with 806 Missouri would like to go on record that we were opposed to Senate Bill 806 for the same reasons Kenny Lane represented. Apologize.
Any questions? None, thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and all members of the committee. This is Greg Gibson. I still work at District 11, and also here for the Missouri AFL also. Go on record being opposed to the bill.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next. Anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 806? On an informational basis? Okay. Senator, do you have any closing remarks?
I think there were some good points made on both sides on this bill. Look forward to working with the parties involved, but
would reiterate that fair and open elections, transparency, and openness are key to our system of government and ought to be the case in our government employees.
It sounded
as
to me,
well.
I was hearing that some of them would like to have access to the Board of Mediation.
Yeah, that can be a topic of discussion. Thank you, Senator, for the hearing. Thank you, members of the committee, for your time.
Okay, this will bring to a close the hearing on Senate Bill 806. Next, we have Senate Bill 980. Senator Keaveny.
Okay. Thank you.